Namaskar. Alternate Tuesday nights are Elmer Yuen nights, and today is no different. And we have some developing events happening in China, as well as on that submarine that was supposedly, hit a uncharted seamount. So there are two versions about what happened on the USS Connecticut. We're going to listen to both sides and also Elmer's gut on what really happened. And the second one is the recently concluded CCP Plenary session. If you look at the resolution, there's some very interesting details emerging. For both of these things, let's go over and yield the floor to Elmer. Elmer, namaskar, welcome to PGurus channel. And
hi, how are you?
My friend,
nice to see you again. Sorry, I'm not properly dressed.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I'm visiting my daughter in Vegas. Anyway, this morning I sent Siri a Chinese YouTube talking about their version of the nuclear submarine story, which is the Connecticut, of course. And the US, of course, not too long ago, had their version a few days ago, which means they hit the underwater mountain, whatever. And China claimed their weaponry somehow unmanned weaponry has hit the nuclear submarine, Connecticut. And to be honest with you, all government lie. No difference anywhere, right? So we have to believe, we have to use our judgment after all, right? So when I remember I was on your program about a month ago and talking about the same issue, and basically I said we had a very objective view of this. I said it hit an active object, means that active object is moving. It's not just a floating type of object. So. And it couldn't really possibly be a underwater mountain or a huge bump, because the experience of these submarine seamen is so good, and they have equipment. It's not by human judgment. They have equipment. There's no reason the equipment cannot detect. I mean, today, even in civilian, we have the Tesla auto drive, right? Should be able to go around any hindrance. And now we're talking about the highest technology, military nuclear submarine in the world, and it can just hit it. And that's not acceptable. Let's put it that way. And the Chinese version, I would say, they exaggerate also for political purpose. They want to convince their countrymen that they have unbelievably superior weapon, and so you have to discount them. But I still stick to my old version that a Chinese unmanned kind of object, which is really either a drone, underwater drone, or some kind of hardware, moving hardware, maneuverable hardware, has hit the submarine, and it caused quite a big damage. And after that, the submarine has to rush back to Guam. Also, I think in the Chinese version, they identify some of the location, not the exact location where it happened, I believe, but the location, somehow they identify some location. And it's really not that far from what we said. It's basically, I believe it's in South China Sea, and it's quite near to the Chinese nuclear submarine base, which is in Hainan Island, facing South China Sea. So in fact, this nuclear submarine accident or incident is maybe one of the many that's because this one is it's reported, but I believe there are so many others not reported. So the tension is very high. I think both countries, if you look at underwater, You can look at the space. You remember the Chinese sent a rocket orbiting the Earth once, and then they shoot a missile through the atmosphere, gliding first, and then supersonic down to an object at the supersonic speed, and only about
Hypersonic, I thought.
hypersonic, sorry, only about 35 kilometers off target. And this could easily be a nuclear warhead. And I remember Secretary Pompeo said something very interesting. When Americans see something serious, they normally use the word "this is serious shit." But
Right,
of course,
right.
him being a diplomat, he cannot use such word. He said, "This is very serious stuff." Then you understand. I've watched many war movies, and they used to use that term is often being used, and they try to say it like it's not a big deal. But then, of course, when they say that, it means it's a big deal. It is a very big deal, and U.S. is scrambling all kinds of to look for solutions. Dooms, you remember recently talking about the super doom, like far more advanced than the one the Israeli use. And they are looking for solutions, but it's very serious. And the US is being threatened in many ways, in AI, in many areas. And the Chinese penetration and infiltration into the Western world is very, very, very deep. Fortunately, it didn't do much to India because I think between China and India, they never felt they are going to be in serious conflict. I mean, it's border conflict, but they never thought the animosity can become so serious until now. So they were not really infiltrating India that much. Also, language problem, cultural. It's not so easy for a Chinese to dress like in your costume, and vice versa. So the relationship between the two countries, China and India, has not been that close across. So therefore, I always comment. I think you need to know your enemy well because you never know. They can do all kinds of things to harm you, and you are already economically becoming their threat, and also your population, your size is causing a tremendous threat to China. So of course, openly you also declare so. So I'm afraid that your people and our audience should really study China seriously, and that's why I suggested Siri to bring up the subject of the sixth plenary, which only occurred, which only finished a week ago, roughly about a week ago in Beijing. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but before we go into the plenary session and its resolutions and how it impacts the rest of the world outside of China,
Yes.
there are lots of interesting things that were discussed there. So we're going to come to that. But I just had a follow-up question with you, Elmer. Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi met 18 times since 2014, 1-8.
Yes.
And these 18 times, evidently, there are no notes, which is very surprising. When two heads of state meet, you're supposed to keep notes, who said what. So there were 18 occasions for each to study the other person very closely. For some reason, the perception is that Modi may have misjudged Xi Jinping. What is your perception? Do you think Xi Jinping has judged Modi correctly? What do you think?
Xi Jinping is a man of very little ability, but one thing is very, very good. All right. I want to use a bad word, kissing ass. He's damn good. He kisses ass all the way up to his position, believe it or not. Unfortunately, China is not a democracy. So he's able to keep on appease the people of higher power and get into that position. That is his best ability, unbelievable, probably the best in China to be able to be the number one in China. I think he did the same to your Mr. Modi from your country, and he's with the communists, they have no religion, especially nowadays. They don't study the old Chinese classic. They don't have even the Chinese value. So they can lie through their teeth and do anything illegal without feel bad. This is the way this communism has become. I'm sure India is more familiar with the USSR. They were the same. All right, the communists in Russia, in Eastern Europe, and in China were no different. So they can lie. They can do anything. If I were him, let me tell you what I would do. I would say, oh, we two countries are the biggest in the world. Together combined, we probably account for maybe half of the world's population. And let's work together and dominate the world. That's the way they say things. That's the way he would say things. All right? And of course, these things cannot be written down. And it sounds good. Yeah, we're partners, right? It's not going to be, and it feels good. You know, when you feel something like that, oh, he respect me and treat me as equal. That's the way it works. He does the same to Donald Trump. When he visited what's this the club in Florida, and also they did the same in Beijing when Donald Trump visited Beijing. He gave him the highest treatment in the Forbidden City. Basically, it's the highest ever. You know, he's been able to go to the former dynasties, emperors, study and bedroom and everything, well treated. So he's very, very good at that. But everything changed after the trade war, and then the conflict, the conflict, of course, in your India and China borderline. In the communist culture, there is no friend. There is no friend. Today, they like to work with the people they can work with and defeat somebody weaker. And tomorrow, they find another party slightly weaker and they eliminate. They keep on doing this. They call this splitting. So they use this to split the world, all right? And you are on my side, and then they use it. They partner with somebody and defeat one enemy. And then the same partner can become an enemy, or half of their partner can become an enemy. They know how to divide and conquer. That is the solution. This is one of the art of war, you know, divide and conquer. It's one of the little piece of course, everybody uses, but they are so good at it in dividing the world.
Thank you very much for that clarification. And I mean, there are so many things that can be understood, read between the lines of what you just said. So let's hope that, you know, some wisdom reigns. Next question is the recently concluded plenary session, the 6th plenary session of the CCP. Now, there were a lot of resolutions and you know, somehow people have glossed over it, maybe because there were other things happening around the world, but there are some significant decisions that have been made. Perhaps you can share your main concerns as to how it affects inside China and then also the rest of the world.
Okay. Resolution to us is a very serious issue. After the meeting, what has been decided and what has been passed. Let me explain to you the communist structure. Of course, you have the people. And then in China, you have the 90 million party members. And from the party members, you select roughly about 400 central committee members. These are really have to have a great track record. And then you are being promoted or picked into this central committee. And the central committee is more or less like a lifetime. Once you're in, by the time you get in, you are almost retired. Right? You're almost retired. And all have already retired, more or less. It's very senior. I would say people at least have to be almost over 50 to enter that. And about 300-400. And they really is like the core of the Communist Party. These are the most disciplined, organized, and loyal communists. I've met a few of them. Very cool. Never say much. Very low profile. You never hear from them. You see, you read all these Chinese newspapers, you never hear them. But this is the real power. When it comes to very, very important decision, it has nothing to do with the parliament or the Congress. It has to do with this committee. So they in China, I'm sorry, most of your audience don't live in China. Whenever they say we have to obey the central, means the central committee, right? That's referred to them. So these 400 some people will elect like 20, 30 Politburo members. And from the Politburo, you have sometimes 7, 8, or no more than 9 standing Politburo members. And Xi Jinping, of course, is the general secretary for the Communist Party, of course, and also the head of the standing Politburo member. That's the way it works. Now, sixth plenary, every 5 years, they have a big meeting, Congress of all the whole country. It's called it's the entire country. Like every 4 years you have election, but in China it's 5 years. And during these 5 years, almost all the most important, more than Central Committee, all the most important government civil servants or officials, and most of them, 95% of them are Communist Party members. So they will meet. So more or less like all the prominent Communist Party member with government responsibility would meet next year, November, in Beijing. And this is within every 5 years, you have many plenary sessions. This is number 6. And normally before the big meeting, you have the number 7, maybe 2 weeks before, just to confirm the agenda and so on. So this is the number 6. It's very, very important. And before it happened, there was huge publicity from Xi Jinping's side to say that he wants to dominate. He wants to make the number 3 documentation. In the history of the Communist Party, 100 years history, there were only 2 documents before. He wants to make this 3rd document in this 6th plenary, naming him basically as the 3rd biggest leader of China. Number 1, of course, Mao. And then number 2 is Deng Xiaoping, who has basically started this reform and open up China to make China. So he wanted to say, Chairman Mao made China stood up, and Deng Xiaoping made China rich, and him in this 6th plenary want to make China the strongest. So stand up, rich, and then strong. And all this propaganda before the 6th plenary, very aggressive. And we knew it's going to happen one way or the other. And according to this resolution, it didn't happen. He was boasting that he wants to basically bring China to a new form of communist, the real communist. What he's saying is the Russian, the USSR, and the old Chinese communism was not real enough. He is going to bring you the real thing, which means very, very strictly communistic, meaning no private property, no ownership of private property. Everything is owned by the state, and you are just a person. You have no asset. That's the way communism in their doctrine is. So he's going to do away with anything that has to do with capital. Capital can only belong to the state controlled by the Communist Party. That is what he wanted to do. And the resolution, unfortunately, didn't mention any of those. The resolution said, oh, we keep on with Deng Xiaoping's opening up and reform. And we keep on going this path. And that is very serious. Means he has hit a huge bump. And that may even affect his re-election in November next year when it comes to the big meeting among all the Communist Party members with official responsibilities. So that is very serious. So what's happening is, meaning what he was trying to push is not happening. The old guards, and let me call it deep state, the Chinese deep state, refused to follow him, right? What you have seen tremendous achievement in China in the last 20 some or 30 years, right? The global economic, they become so powerful and they infiltrated almost every country, probably except yours. And they've done a lot of unbelievable work in science, in politics, in economy, in every aspect, infrastructure, you name it. He didn't do it. Xi Jinping didn't do it. He inherited that from the old guards. And now the old guards, of course, letting Xi Jinping be the prominent guy, they became the deep state. And Xi Jinping was extremely unnice to them. He started with the anti-corruption campaign. Of course, the old guards were very corrupted. I mean, they let everybody get rich and themselves first. All right, so they were extremely rich. They control all their foreign currency. Remember, I was talking about $20 trillion. They end up getting most of them. Most Chinese, the mainland Chinese and their company only got this RMB. These old guys are most powerful. Companies like Temasek in India, like SoftBank in Japan, like this Davos, all the Wall Street companies, they work for these deep states. All right, Xi Jinping has no control. Xi Jinping has some control of the military and some control of the police. But as far as when it comes to economy is concerned, the deep state controls everything. It's very much like US, under Donald Trump. All right, of course, not the same. But Donald Trump has very little control over the bureaucracy and over the economy and over everything. I mean, Donald Trump has to support the people. So Xi Jinping is more or less the same situation. But even then, lately, in the last 1 year, he even lost all the support of the people. Huge inflation, huge unemployment happening right now in the last few months. All right, and then the property price. Property price account for 70% of personal assets, went down almost half. So originally, when he started about 9 years ago, he was quite popular for anti-corruption, all right, do away. And then he became more and more overconfident, and eventually he lost all the support. There are basically three elements in China that's against him. First of all, they are the old guards, meaning Zhang and Wu, and they belong to the old guards. And then the Chinese, the communists, as you know, they have the League, Communist League, where they started when they're a young person with a pioneer red flag, and then they all go all the way up. And from the League, they draw their bureaucrats. All right, you must be communist all the way. And then the third group are the rich second or third generation from the revolutionaries. He has basically hurt all their interests. Now even hurt the interests of the general public, the non-communist member. So he suddenly, in the last few years, and of course the whole world, almost I would say 80% of the free world is against him, right? Everyone, every country. You look what's happening to Lithuania, and they're ready to recognize Taiwan and break up with China. So anyway, these groups, understanding if they let him continue with his new communist, so-called the real communist policies, and then let him be re-elected, so-called elected, or continue to be the party secretary, then they knew they're all going to end up like Jack Ma. Jack Ma went to Europe, signed off all the paper of his asset in Europe, sent it back, and then went back to China. Then he was under control the whole trip to Hong Kong and then to Spain. Now he's back in China with his family. If he didn't sign it, his whole family, everybody would be gone. So this is common. I'm not telling you anything special. Common communist tactics. They want to take back everything. Jack Ma, of course, is the symbol of Chinese capitalism. All right, he was the richest Chinese probably in the world. Now he has to give up all his assets back to the state. All right? So this is what Xi Jinping wanted to do. So the three groups I mentioned, of course, they care about the money they took from the Chinese people. All right, they took, and they are afraid to lose it. They cannot try. All their mistresses and children, illegitimate children or legitimate children, are all over the world, in the United States, Australia, Canada, Europe, and so on. You saw many of them in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. I was going to say we have quite a few in the Silicon Valley too.
And they cannot go back or travel. And all of a sudden, they basically, Xi Jinping was ready to cut them off and force them to repatriate all those assets in trillions. So at the sixth plenary, this is what you saw. What he expected to happen, what he was driving, didn't happen. That's what's important. What's not written there is what the issue is. What he wanted before the meeting and what he ended up with at the resolution was everything he wanted did not happen. So this is damn serious, which means I call the deep state have fought back during the sixth plenary. The 400 members, most of them, because they have lifetime members, they got their membership at the Central Committee membership way before Xi Jinping came. Xi Jinping probably appointed less than 1/4 of them. So 3/4 of them were appointed way back before his time. So what happened is he was outvoted and he cannot shut them out. These are very, very tough old guys, old communists, probably the most staunch Communist Party members. So obviously they had their say. We must continue with the economic policy from Deng Xiaoping, continue to open up, continue to reform, and work with the rest of the world. That is the message. Sorry, it was a 35,000 character report for the resolution. There's no way, even if you read it, you wouldn't understand, because it says everything normal. Everything's so normal. We have to do this, do that, and Hong Kong, one country, two systems. Everything was the old policy that he tried to change. So it's a very, very significant. So for instance, like with India, which of course your audience are most concerned with, you are going to see less aggressive policy. With Hong Kong, with Taiwan, with India, with all the neighbors, there may be a dramatic change. And of course, he's not going to lie down and let them walk over him. He's going to fight back, right? This is not they don't have a legal transfer of power. I fight you, you fight me, I stab you in the back, and so on. Or whatever dirty trick you can think of, they use, all right? Because there's no law. So from now till next November, he will try his best to fight back. And that is exactly what happened to the Cultural Revolution. The reason Chairman Mao started the revolution is during one of these meetings, people said, God, we have 40, 50 million people starved to death, already died, starved to death. And then you need to be responsible. And then he was marginalized. Chairman Mao was marginalized, and then he started the Cultural Revolution. He said he has all the officials, at that time also at the deep state, didn't listen to him because he's committed a huge mistake in this great leap forward. All right. And it was a total flop, and over 40 million people died, starved to death. And so he stepped back and he planned this Cultural Revolution. He went to the students because no officials, all right, no Communist Party members supported him. So he went to the students and started this Cultural Revolution by the students, closed down all the schools. Then the students become gangsters. And then the students went and arrested all the party and government officials and put them into prison and tortured them. And the president of China, the president of People's Republic of China, Liu Shaoqi, which is the second most powerful man, the man criticized him at that meeting, was tortured to death. And then after he died, only 10 years later, they found him in the unnamed grave. That's the way they fight. And during this fight, at least 10 million people died or committed suicide. Huge. You see teachers, college teachers, because the kids, the first thing they do is to go and fight their teachers. You will be too tough to me, this and that. The teachers, they live by their respect, right? And if you insult them, if the students continue to insult them, they jump. They jump from the floor, they commit suicide. You know how many teachers commit suicide. So what's happening now is very much like there is a meeting of 7,000 people, all right? That's where Mao got sidelined. And what happened this sixth plenary is very much like the 7,000 meeting. You can Google the 7,000 people meeting. This is where Mao had to take responsibility and had to admit he made mistake in the Great Leap Forward, leading to the death of tens of millions of people. But this is only verbal, all right? It's a verbal admission of guilt. He went back and planned this entire cultural revolution. And China, you have no idea. We lost most of our culture. 80% of our culture was destroyed during the Cultural Revolution. This is from 1966 to 1976. All schools, including kindergarten, all were closed. And Xi Jinping belonged to the generation that stopped going to school when he was 9 years old. All right, and he was like born in 53 or 54, and when they started the Cultural Revolution, I think he's probably 11 years old. No school after 11 years old. That's why this man has very, very little education. He actually understands no law, no economics. Even his mathematics is in doubt. You understand? So we are dealing with a person is so powerful, probably the most powerful person in the world, yet very little education. Family was his father. I knew his father. Father was arrested, put in prison for 16 years. All right, father arrested, and mother had to look after 5 kids, and the mother has to go to be re-educated several times a week. So he's basically a street guy, a street gang. You know street gang, right? In your country, and this is how he's brought up. And when you are a street gang, it's very much like mafia. Whoever is powerful, you kiss up to him. All right, and the rest you beat up, and you have to be tough. That was his behavior in the last 6 years. All right, he knows how to kiss and please his superior, the people with power, and then he stamp on the people without power, and that is the China that people are living right now, and you have to stand up to him. If you stand up to him like Donald Trump, then he's scared. All right, he wouldn't do anything. But the minute you try to appease him, you're finished. Like Biden now, he doesn't even treat Biden properly. He said, "Well, Biden is nothing." All right, that's why they took over Afghanistan with his full support. But if Donald Trump is there, he wouldn't do it. He would never do it. That's the way this whole thing is playing out.
Sorry, I have a couple of questions, and we can continue this trend or this particular topic. First question is, did you say that the real estate has dropped by 50%, over half? Is it across China?
Across China, no sales. This is why Evergrande is in trouble. Evergrande is only one of the property companies, developer. All of them in trouble. The price drop, people don't buy. When people don't buy, you have no cash flow. Or the developer have no cash flow to pay back their debt. The whole property business, like everybody else, they borrow, right? They borrow. But in China, they over borrow. And as a result, when the market slows down, they cannot pay back. And of course, with RMB, they can somehow scramble some RMB and pay off. But when it comes in Hong Kong, you have to pay back in foreign currency, Hong Kong or US dollars. He didn't have it. He has to scramble like crazy, sell his boat, sell his house, sell his jewelry, collection, whatever, to pay back. And it's very critical now whether he's able to pay back the interest for the foreign currency. And everything can become due. And altogether, the public listed company from China listed in Hong Kong altogether has borrowed over $3 trillion in Hong Kong. And if Evergrande failed to pay off interest or principal, it has a domino effect on all the Chinese public company listed in Hong Kong.
So there are also many American investors who have invested in not only Hong Kong, but also in mainland China. Does that mean that there is an imminent correction to the Wall Street if that happens?
You see, these are very clever. The Chinese are very clever. They knew they were going to run short of foreign currencies. So when Trump started the trade war, and it's a series of action, The U.S. stopped their IPO and then this and that. But the U.S. basically was turning off the tap on their access to U.S. dollars. So the Chinese went ahead and invited all the Wall Street companies. Originally, Wall Street are only allowed to own 50% joint venture in China. So suddenly they open up, let them own 100%, like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, you name it, most of the BlackRock and all these companies. Suddenly they allow them to own 100%. So these guys, of course, blinded by greed and money, they went into China and capitalized. So meaning they send in more money, all right, to buy up the Chinese company's share. US banks 50%, Chinese company 50%. So they need to come up with the money to buy up the partners 50%, to have 100% own. This is not only the banking industry, and this is happening to the auto industry, like Volkswagen. They're so happy. Oh, now we don't have to suffer from the disruption by the Communist Party member during our production, during our operation. They went in, they bought over the shares of their communist partner, right? And then next thing, they pump more money in because the banks don't lend them so much anymore in China. So they have to bring in more foreign currencies to balance what they are losing. So these are very, very clever people. And this is how they play. They really do know their business. And in the meantime, the property price is going to hell. And second-hand transaction almost stopped, or a second-hand property, and then first-hand, huge drop. All in all, half were lost. And what happened, of course, like I said before, the property company cannot pay off their debt, and the banks are in trouble. That is not only the Chinese banks are in trouble, the global banks are in trouble, because you're talking about trillions of dollars of syndicated loan, landed bonds issued in Hong Kong to these people. And of course, you remember the US Federal Reserve gave a warning to China. They better behave with this Evergrande. Otherwise, it may cause a much bigger storm than the Lehman Brothers. The Lehman Brothers problem was only $400 billion. And now we are talking about 10 times, $4 trillion, all the foreign currency the Chinese have borrowed from the rest of the world. And the whole world is greedy because at home, you put the money in the bank, you get at least at the most, maybe 1%, right? There's no interest, or sometimes nothing. Lending to China, you get 5 to 6%. Who can resist such temptation? They know how to play games. They're very good at it. So in a way, I mean, these are the old guys. Xi Jinping really he doesn't understand economics at all. So he leave it to these old guys. The old guys in China, they have lifetime job. If you are a head, you are a manager, first of all, you come from bottom. Once you do that job, let's say you're a central bank governor, you have years and years of experience, and you know how to handle people. Doesn't matter the language, or handle the Americans.
So, there is stress on the banks, and now the American companies have gone in whole hog, and essentially they're being forced to put more and more money. But this cycle is going to stop at some point. Do you think it's going to be like 6 months from now? And where does digital renminbi, blockchain-based Bitcoin, where does that come in? Because China, in parallel, has been trying to weaken the US dollar by telling countries that, look, you buy using digital renminbi, and this digital renminbi is backed by the gold we have in our system. You know, they are basically saying, like, pre-1973 or whenever that Nixon took the dollar off of the gold peg, they are saying the same thing. So is that another smoke and mirrors, or is there substance behind it?
This is their plan. They introduced digital currency first, digital RMB first, to replace the paper RMB in China. Right. Now, they have two sets of money, remember, all right? The set of money in China for the Chinese people, and a set of money they trade with us, all right? So they do digital first so that every Chinese, their asset become exposed to the government. You cannot keep cash around. I think you've done something similar, right? Years ago, something similar by exchanging your notes. But anyway, once they go digital, you are in total control by the government because they control all the banks. Every penny you spend, they control. They can turn you off just like that. So suddenly your bank account or your credit card doesn't work anymore. So that's step number one. All right. And then this is China in the last, I would say, 70 years, they have been keep on buying gold. And the goal is they not only buying. China itself has gold. They've been exploiting gold, taking gold from their own mine. So they have both China and Russia have huge gold reserve, many times of what they reported. So, but this gold they don't need it for their Chinese money. Eventually, they want to replace the American dollars by backing up with the gold. It could be a digital or not digital. That's only a matter of
Semantics,
but
yeah.
it's a matter. But the backing, all right, for people to accept RMB, either digital form or whatever form, they need the backing. What if you don't cash out the money? Where do I get the money? And China claims, oh, we have huge reserve in Beijing. Promises, all right, what you can get. So right now, China, of course, is the biggest buyer of oil, for instance. And already the Saudi Arabia and these few big countries is willing to take RMB because they can use the RMB and buy Chinese goods and somehow offset with other countries who import Chinese goods. So it's workable now unto a limit. But nobody's using the Chinese RMB as a reserve currency. Their objective is gradually to get the world to use the Chinese RMB to be reserve currency, basically to beat the American. US dollar is a pie in the cloud. If once you have something to replace it, the whole thing will collapse. The whole thing will collapse. Then because right now there is no substitute. Once there's a substitute, the whole U.S. economy will collapse. I don't know whether you were in U.S. during the Lehman crisis.
I was.
At that time, Paulson was thinking about coming up with the new U.S. dollars because the present U.S. dollars, there's not just too much of it. The minute they come back and to U.S. to buy up all your shares, you don't have enough shares or goods to supply for that dollar. Let's say the dollar suddenly come back to U.S. They want to buy something, buy all the property, all the asset, all the shares, everything. You don't have enough asset to sell to those U.S. issued dollars. So Paulson was actually considering that you are not allowed to buy those US dollars outside US are not allowed to come into US. Only US dollar in the US can convert to the new US dollars. What he was planning on that because we didn't know how bad the Lehman crisis, the subprime was going to be. You remember? So that was considered, but very seldom talked about. So they have a contingency plan for the collapse, and China. They are preparing for such a moment. Of course, now they are still very far from it. The gold collecting of gold reserve, the buildup of gold reserve, and eventually they will have two sets of digital. Once you go digital, easy to divide. This is for China and this is for outside. All right, all you need is do a little year mark in the digital. This is their policy. Eventually, the digital currency is to control the Chinese in China. All their money will be digitized and known to the state. And the digital currency outside, eventually, they want to replace the American dollars as a reserve currency.
A lot of stuff in the works and very interesting things. No conversation with Elmer is boring. It's always full of nuggets, and today's is no different. Viewers, please do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Elmer, as always, a pleasure having you on our channel, sir. Take care, and we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time. Namaskar.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sri. Thank you.